This week on Gymwright Live, we show you how to design an onboarding program that will turn every one of your new members into raving fans. Check it out. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Gymwright Live. I am your host, Markus, Gerszi, and with me today we have the lovely Jessica Webster. Say hello, Jessica.
Hey, gym owners. How's it going?
Cool. So Jessica works with us here at Gymwright. She is our queen of marketing, internally, externally, all the good stuff. And we are going to be breaking down today the do's and don'ts of designing a stellar onboarding program for your new members. So the reason why we're going to get into this today is because this is often overlooked in the overall value that we're trying to portray to new members, whether it's even someone considering a new member or to someone who has signed on and is now onboarding and integrating into your community. So we're going to break down the variety of different models and the most common models used and the pros and cons and other considerations as we go. But before we do that, Jessica, you had something you wanted to say about the psychology.
Yes. Okay. So Markus, I feel like you're a little bit like me when it comes to learning something new and actually implementing it. There are a lot of things to learn and there are a lot of people out there that have advice for you, especially in terms of your business. But it's difficult for me to implement something without really understanding the whys, and that goes way deep into the psychological whys. So I thought it would be important to go over these 6 elements, or these are kind of like stages of a marketing or sales process. Mm-hmm. And these are the steps you and anyone else goes through when you're making a buying decision. So most of these stages happen before someone comes in, but the last one, stage 6, is what we're going to be talking about today. So I think we can just go through all 6 of these, and you can jump in there at any point. But so first, stage 1 is when somebody becomes aware of a problem. This is I realized I gained a little body fat because when I bend over, my underwear band snaps down. Have you seen the latest Brian Regan where he talks about that? It's so funny.
Well, that's
so good. Anyway, so underwear band is snapping and it's staying there. I got fat. Okay, so that's stage 1. They realize they need a change and they identify this issue. Okay, mm-hmm. So stage 2 is when they assess the priority of this issue and they figure out ways to solve it. So once they identify their problem, they are okay, is this really a priority for me? And if it is, what am I going to do about it? So this is naturally when somebody goes online and they search for best personal trainers near me or best gym in Orange County, and this will take people to your website. And so this is why we always say it's so important for your website to communicate that you're not selling gym memberships, because people tend to like to categorize things. They just do it automatically. It's something we have to do in order to proceed in life without, making everything super complicated. So especially for somebody who's new in fitness, they want to categorize your business as either a 24-hour membership kind of thing or a personal trainer kind of thing, which can be really important to distinguish the difference between in terms of perceiving value.
Right, because most boxes fall in between. Right, so they're not what most people are used to. They're not used to putting them in bucket 1 or bucket 2, and they're I'm not sure I quite understand.
Right, exactly. So that's why if your website does communicate that properly and you do get them into your gym for, let's say, that one-on-one free consultation, it's so important for you to identify and to prove that value through a really consultative sales process. Maybe you can take us through a couple of the questions that a really good, thorough consultative or prescriptive sales process would look like in terms of just the conversation prior to the one-on-one experience.
Do you mean the conversation prior to them coming in, or the actual intro itself?
When they come in, people want you to ask them what their fitness goals and challenges are. They
Sure.
want you to bring out of them that their underwear band has snapped down and they can't get it back up.
Right. The whole, there's a workflow we teach with the Gymwright prescriptive sales model, where it's basically you want to figure out where they are, what they've tried, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they think it is that we do. Then explain in plain English what it is that we do. No jargon, anything like that. Then we get into the 3 W's. So what is it that you want? Why is it important to you? And when do you want it by? And that's really where you get the bulk of that information. That's where I think what you're talking about is you're addressing those things, and oftentimes you're teasing them out in a manner that they've probably never said them out loud before, but that's this step in the process. And that's what allows them to oftentimes for the first time out loud say, oh, that's why I actually want to lose the weight. It's not just because it's the role on my band. It's that I'm tired of feeling self-conscious or whatever it is. So important to draw that out.
Yeah, definitely. They want you to take them through that full sensory experience so they can create this like new category where your gym lives. Right. And even if they've visited other CrossFit boxes or other like group training style gyms or studio type gyms, they really need to start creating that new category. And you want to be like that primo gym in their mind.
Right.
So that kind of takes you to the fourth phase where this person now has a really knowledgeable, it's just a knowledgeable decision-making like time now, right? This whole process is just about empowering somebody so much to the point to where they can actually make a decision that's right for them. And the only reason they don't become a new member is if they actually believe that they're not a good fit for your gym, which is also great for you. So in no area throughout this whole sales and marketing process should there be any like disruptions or distractions, because it's very flowy and it goes in the way that they will naturally create a decision or decide on something to purchase. And so the next stage is purchase, which is pretty self-explanatory, but also this purchasing step needs to be very flowy, just like the rest of the process before it. And then we get into the sixth stage, which is evaluation. And that's what we're going to talk about today. In this sixth stage, your new members are like on high alert. This is post-purchase. It's a little bit more expensive than what they're probably used to. And these people are on high alert. They are sensing how comfortable they are in class. They're judging your coaching staff like to the T. They're measuring or at least kind of observing what their results are. And they're subconsciously looking to see if what you promised on your website and in your one-on-one consultation, if all that's actually true.
Yep.
And so it's this 3 to 6 month time where people can quit anytime they want. Even if you have contracts, like people can quit. You know, very rarely do you hold people to contracts when, have to go to court or something. Anyway, you want to create this really, really lovely onboarding process, because this is where they are the most delicate in the entire like new member phase where they're evaluating you.
100%. I look at it as, I liken it to dating, because sometimes you can get lucky and get on a first date, right? And someone's like, hey, seems like a nice guy. Like, I'll give him a shot. But it's dates 2 through 4 that really are going to make or break, right? Because you're basically going to either prove them right or prove them wrong. And most people who are coming into your gym are kind of looking for you to prove them right about this isn't worth it. This is too hard. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do this. I'm going to fail at this just like every other thing I've tried in fitness. So that little voice in the back of their head is basically looking for opportunities to be proven right. And that's where you lose them. So an onboarding process, if you can really understand, what it is that you do, but more importantly, where they are and the kind of, concerns and questions and kind of unspoken objections that are going through their head, and you can, kind of dismantle them and address them proactively and prove them wrong, basically, that, hey, look, this is awesome and you did make a great decision and you're going to love this. And that's really how I always look at this part of the relationship, which is why a lot of people who say, I don't like doing an onboarding program, it's inconvenient, or, it's not necessary. It isn't just about the coaching movement piece. You could be the best coach and not need an onboarding technically. We have people who we work with who are like that. However, it's more a matter of the ability to address those things and really ease them in and hit those things and address those issues that are going on in the back of their head proactively.
I love your example of the date. Like that is like creating a relationship, I mean, even when you have somebody that's locked in, like let's say 5-year contract or something, and they're sticking to it. You don't want to go all dad bod on them, because just like a relationship, somebody can decide not to want to deal with that anymore, So like you really have to work at these relationships. And that kind of made me think of another analogy. Oh, I love analogies. It's so fun. In second, third, fourth date, totally, totally important. But also another thing that's important when you're dating someone are all those little text messages and all the bits of communication that are happening when you two are apart. And that could go into the realm of like, what email communication are you having right after they've signed on for that one-on-one to come in for their first date? Are you prepping them for, like, are you getting them excited? You know, are you having a little like texting foreplay to get people really stoked about being in there? Because that little voice in your head, if anybody has ever done Tinder or like online dating, that little voice in your head will probably start to talk you out of visiting that person or like meeting them for the first time or like even for the 5th time these days, you know? Mm-hmm. Just like Tinder, there are a million gym options now. And so you really have to make sure that you're the best and that you communicate yourself authentically so that you don't have that bait and switch problem where you have people coming in, they're expecting amazing service. Maybe your one-on-one is amazing, but then your onboarding program is just crap. And then that's like the absolute worst when you're dating someone, when you find out that once you're now boyfriend, girlfriend, that this guy just spends all his time playing video games and doesn't want to pay attention to you. And yes, that has happened to me and it sucks.
I was going to ask. Awesome. Cool. All right, that's Jessica's share for the day. Cool. And by the way, for those of you guys watching right now, be sure to stick around to the end of the show for the live Q&A. You can start typing questions into the comments below throughout the show and we'll address them at the end. And if you're watching this after the live airing, just make sure that you tag Jessica or myself in any questions that you have because we will address them after the fact as well. So, okay, Jessica, let's jump in. So let's start with why a gym owner should care about this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I feel like it's pretty simple. First of all, for most of the gym owners that I've spoken to, they actually just like this part of owning a gym the most, right? This is where you are starting to create paradigm shifts in people's minds. And that's like one of the most fulfilling parts of owning a gym.
Yep.
Can you relate to that?
That is literally my very favorite part. I think that you used to do this
at Active all the time.
When I was running Active, it was the very last thing I let go of was doing the intros and doing the initial onboarding sessions. And it wasn't because I had a lack of staff or people to do it. I just liked it the most because this was my opportunity to make the biggest impact. If I knocked it out of the park on my intro and then had a stellar onboarding experience that basically, proved what I was talking about and set them up for success, I could permanently change people's lives. And that's really the whole purpose of our gym. So for me, I took a lot of pride and put a lot of love into those intro and onboarding sessions. As a matter of fact, I still do that now with Gymwright. With our new clients that come on board, I do the intro and I do the onboarding because this is about setting the tone for everything to come. And it's the most important opportunity and I want to make sure we do a good job. So,
totally.
Anywho.
I think another thing that is really important for gym owners to know about this process is that it can change with the nature of your gym. So when you first start off, one of the models, like the group model that we'll get into in a bit, would probably be more conducive to the way that you're set up when you're brand new, versus one of the more one-on-one things. And just like anything that is really important to you, these things can get complicated. And I find that it's helpful looking at examples of ways that people have done it well already instead of trying to like create it all on my own and start there. So hopefully by the end of this podcast, you guys will be taken 80-90% of the way there and you can tweak it for whatever your unique situation is. But I really love these frameworks that we have going on here because we've spoken to so many, Markus just disappeared. We've spoken to so many gym owners that have done it in ways that we would never have tried before. And so at least now we know that there are ways not to do it and ways to do it.
Yeah, and we're going to break down exactly how to design your own. So whether you're just getting started or you have one in place that maybe you want to tweak or upgrade, we'll go through all the key steps here and exactly how to do that. Before we move on, one of the things I wanted to say about why I think someone should care about this or why gym owner should care about this is, perceived value for us is at the end of the day, the most important asset we have with our clients, right? It's how they value their service and their relationship with us. And I think it should be your number one focus at every step along the way to maximize perceived value. Because if you maximize perceived value and that is higher than what you're charging, it feels like it's worth more than what you're charging, you're always going to have a much easier conversion, onboarding, retention, getting referrals and all that because they feel like, wow, I'm getting so much relative to what I pay is what it breaks down to. And a lot of people, most people, as a matter of fact, in my experience, when they start at a CrossFit gym or a box style gym, they still think this is just a gym membership. They're thinking, I just bought an expensive gym membership. I'm not sure what it was. I liked him or her in the intro that I had, so I'm giving this a shot. But at the end of the day, their experience more often than not has been in one of those two models you mentioned. It's either personal training, one-on-one, super expensive all the way through, which few people do, or it's the super low cost, low value, nobody's there to help me, I'm completely on my own model, and have not experienced real coaching and where people legitimately care that you are there and achieving your results and that there's a community. So I also look at this as, this is where you can dramatically build that perceived value in your gym by basically teaching them what they actually bought. Real customized coaching by people who care, community of like-minded people, who are growing and learning together, who support you when you're aren't having the best day, and have fun with lifelong friends. You're getting nutritional guidance and support. Basically takes the guesswork out of how to eat correctly, which is one of the number one questions you get from new athletes at your gym. And ultimately a path to a longer, happier, and more fulfilling life, which is priceless, right? Once they get that, which is what typically happens in that 3 to 6 months if you do your job right, someone realizes, I didn't buy a gym membership. Like, this is now my new way of life. And basically that $150 to $300 a month that I'm paying for my gym membership, whatever that looks like, is nominal relative to all of these priceless things that I'm getting out of this. It's not just a gym membership. And again, you may nail it in your intro session, but what happens is that little voice in the back of their head, if it's not compounded over and over and over, and you're proving that voice wrong and reconditioning that voice to be like, oh wait, there's a third option. There's this like magical type of gym in my community that I actually is going to make me love fitness, and I love showing up every day. Like, it's what I think about all day. It's my favorite part of my day. They've usually never looked at it that way. And that's your opportunity to carve that out and make that yours. And to me, this is what this is all about. So,
just to double underline that if I can.
Go for it.
Another thing that you have to consider is one of the major objections to joining a gym that might cost more than your typical gym membership is people who have shared income. Mm-hmm. And so explaining to somebody who, let's say there's the man in the relationship, it's really tough for him to go to the 24-hour fitness, where maybe his wife, she goes to Zumba, she goes to all these classes, the 24 hours, she's like, honey, my membership costs $12 a month, we're kind of short on change. Can you just I don't understand why this is so difficult. So one of the actual challenges that it's kind of awkward to talk about sometimes is giving your new members enough ammo, I guess, to kind of go home and to explain to their partner all the values that they're getting, just so they can effectively communicate why this is a good experience for them. Because if there's anything more powerful than that voice in your head, it's the voice that you live with that could talk you out of making a decision that might be good for you, but you don't really know how to really talk about it.
100%. So ideally, if you have couples, or that they have a spouse that also trains, maybe not here, it's if you can, try to get them in for an intro as well and do it together if possible, so that you can have this conversation together. But that's not always the case, and sometimes you're having a conversation with a spouse, and for me, I never really minded doing that, having a follow-up call or conversation with someone who was kind of second guessing or being that voice in their ear, saying, hey, why don't you come in? I'm happy to walk you through this too, and have oftentimes turned that into 2 sales rather than 1. So,
ooh, nice.
All right, so let's dig in. So the first place I want to start is with the group model. So let's talk about the 3 models that are out there, right? So we've got the group model, and this could be small group, could be larger group. This could be in the form of a 6-week program that is like a secondary lead flow intake method rather than your primary intro sales process, which you can kind of turn into an extended onboarding. Then we have the personal training, so any one-on-one version. And then lastly, no on-ramp, right? Or no onboarding at all. So pros and cons of, let's start with the group model. Pros. It's very efficient, right? It's a one-to-many approach, so it's much more efficient from a staffing standpoint. And also it appeals to a lot of people because it doesn't single them out. It doesn't focus on just them, which for a lot of people, we as coaches know how much more of an impact and how much better it is to do one-on-one. But remember, the only one-on-one experience that most people have had is with that uber salesy personal trainer at 24-hour fitness that made them feel really uncomfortable and just pointed out a bunch of shit that they didn't want to talk about. And now they imagine that you're going to do exactly that. So they think, oh, at least I'm kind of safe in that group environment.
One of my favorite things about the group training sort of on-ramp process is that you also graduate with a bunch of other people that are new. And so you can sort of lament over being like silly and not really knowing what you're doing. And then you create that bond with other people that are like just starting out in it. 100%. I always think that's super fun.
Yeah. So you also create, another pro is that you create a kind of like a mini community with that group of people, right? Especially if you can do that by design as the person running this program. You want to do things that gets them interacting, from like team warm-ups and workouts and things like that throughout your onboarding. If you're doing that model, it's really, really beneficial. All right. Some cons to consider. Obviously it's less personal than a one-on-one. It's less flexible from a scheduling standpoint, because now people are going to have to wait until your next one starts. Now, you could do them weekly, which is a great way to kind of get around that. You can kind of stagger, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like if let's say you have 6 sessions, and it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 2 weeks, you can start one this week and then start next week a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. But obviously you're going to need the volume to support that. So it's going to really be a consideration around what's appropriate for you from a volume standpoint, staffing standpoint, cost to fulfill standpoint, and all that. But ideally, you don't want to have people wait to get started. Like when you have someone come in for an intro, your goal is to get them started on whatever you are selling them as quickly as possible, because you want to keep them on that high and keep them excited, because again, that little voice in the back of their head is going to start getting louder and louder and can demotivate them quite a bit if someone has to wait week, 2 weeks, etc. You can circumvent that with some good like drip campaigns and things in between. However, it's not ideal.
Yeah, that is an actual problem. I mean, how many women that are listening right now have colored your own hair with boxed coloring from the grocery store because you just did not want to wait, and it's been a terrible disaster? That happens in buying decisions all the time. People will go to a lesser sort of like service if it's more immediate, because people are just like that now. So that's 100%. A huge thing. And that applies to follow-up too, which I know we've talked about on the show quite a lot. Yep. Replying to people as soon as possible, that all lies in the same realm of like being the first to respond is the first to resolve their problem.
Yep. First to respond, first to get them in, and then first to get them started. Speed of implementation is absolutely imperative for us in this business, because of people's attention and because of people's fears, right? So, good point. A couple other considerations. You mentioned, this is great for when you're a newer gym. When you're new, it's about, oftentimes you don't have all the staffing yet, and you usually are trying to get to a kind of threshold of survival, if you will, as quickly as you can. So this is a great tool for rapid growth, because it's just easier, more efficient. You can get groups, you can create that community where your classes may not have many people in them yet. So you're really trying to create those chunks of people that you're bringing in, like in blocks at a time, and can serve you really well that way. And anything you want to add to that?
Well, as far as the 6-week challenge goes, this is also a great way to bring in people when there are seasonal flows. So like right before summer begins or right in the beginning of the year. This is another great way to bring in a group of people that can have that community feel. And I love the seasonal 6-week challenges, because more often than not, people have a similar goal in mind. They have the freshness of the new year in their mindset, and so it brings in New Year's resolution type people who have that front of mind. Whereas a 6-week challenge, people maybe closer to summer, they have like beach body on their mind. So you can kind of communicate in a way that is conducive with your audience, rather than people who are just kind of popping in random times in the year. That's all pretty unique based on like what they're feeling at the time.
Sure. Yeah. The 6-week programs, this is a really great tool, to, throughout the year. And I suggest not doing this more than just a handful of times throughout the year. I mean, those 2 that you mentioned are my 2 favorites. I would say once per quarter at the maximum. But this is a great way to bring people in based on a specific kind of macro goal that kind of people have, like the new year, new you kind of thing. And this is an opportunity to not just treat it as an isolated program, but integrate in the concepts that you would have in your onboarding program, so that when someone gets to the end of this thing, they're not just like, okay, I finished this thing and now I've got to go through another pre-program before your real program. Try to integrate all that in, so that when someone goes through this, you can say, hey, and you know what? We've already included all the things that we do in our onboarding program, so you're ready to go right into our group classes and make them an offer. Cool. All right. Second model, one-on-one or personal training. Pros. obviously having a one-on-one interaction with someone, whether it's one session or 20 sessions, you are going to build an infinitely stronger personal relationship with this person. And that means higher perceived value. Everything's more personalized from not just a training standpoint, but an education standpoint, because you can break everything down around them. And then obviously the benefit of just being more flexible around that athlete's schedule, because it's not like, hey, I've got this only at 5 p.m. on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or something like that, where you can say, hey, when can you make this work? Any other pros you want to throw out there?
I would say this has to be my favorite one, and it's the least expected one, especially for a CrossFit gym. Usually when, especially experienced athletes are switching gyms, having this one-on-one experience is so nice for them, because
100%.
they typically tend to leave because of a lack of attention being given to them. It's also good for people who are new, because they may have had past personal training experiences, and for what you're charging, it is a much, much more reduced cost for what is probably a much higher value. So they're thinking, I'm a freaking genius for finding this place. And that's always the feeling that you want to give people when they're leaving your gym, is not that you're necessarily amazing, but that they're amazing for finding you.
Right. You
like
want
they just want to be like,
confirm that they've made a good decision, right? That's what you're reaffirming every day. Yeah, 100%. Okay. So some cons. The big obvious one is that personal training, because it's now your one-on-one attention, is going to just be more expensive, right? Because usually people are like, well, I charge 75 or $100 an hour for my one-on-one. So therefore, if you're going to buy this, 10 pack onboarding program, then people can be like, it's going to cost me, $500 or $1,000 to get started. And we'll get into some considerations around how to approach this, because this is where I think most people who have a one-on-one based intro model completely blow it, because they go so far beyond what's actually necessary for most. I'm actually a fan of, for most gyms who are trying to grow still, to make it actually fewer sessions and make it a little bit more condensed, so that you can not have to make it too expensive. And the barrier to entry is not now some totally outlandish price as far as your new uneducated client is concerned. And it allows you to grow at a little bit more rapid clip while still getting the benefits of that. But the other thing too is, remember, it can be intimidating for a lot of people. Personal training is foreign to a lot of people. And unless someone has already had a good personal training experience, but remember, most have had bad, because the only one they've experienced is that free session you get when you sign up at a Globo gym. And it's, you have to overcome that. So they hear like, oh, personal training is the only way to start. Great. It's going to be super expensive, and it's going to make me really uncomfortable, and it's going to be awkward.
Yeah. I wanted to open up the conversation for my next point here, which is sometimes your coach may be doing the one-on-one is not a good fit just personally for the person coming in. On the flip side, there might be a coach that you have that's really good, and people join the gym and create this relationship with them, and perhaps they leave at some point. So because we are in this relationship building business, like there are human elements that are at play, especially in the one-on-one, because they don't have all the interactions with other personality types. So that could be a thing. Yeah,
for sure. And other considerations around this was, like I said, growth goals. A lot of times a new gym or a young gym or someone who's trying to grow rapidly, either because they're trying to just achieve a certain, milestone financially, or they're operating in the negative and need to get current to where they can pay someone to, hire someone or whatever their goal is. They'll tell me, yeah, but I want to do this really expensive, really in-depth, very hard to sell, one-on-one, where I'm going to sell 10 intro sessions or 15 or 20 intro sessions required. It's the only way to start, because I know it's better as a coach. But you have to take a look at like your growth goals and how this syncs up. Is this in line with that? Because if you even just look at it from a logistical standpoint of, I am going to sell a 10 pack, a 10 session one-on-one intro program to every new person who signs up, and you say, hey, my goal or my needs are 10 new people per month. Think about how many one-on-one sessions. That means you're probably not going to coach a single class, and all you're doing is one-on-ones all day, every day, if you're actually hitting those numbers. And then oftentimes the person says, oh, well, no, I can't actually do that. So you have to take a look at like what your growth goals are, staffing resources and all that too, and make sure that you're designing something that suits your actual goals and needs. And again, not the best fit for someone if you're trying to grow rapidly. All right. Let's move on to no onboarding program. So for the most part, most gym owners should have one. I personally think that pretty much all should. That said, this is also an option I wanted to talk about, because I wanted to talk about the exception to the rule, because it does exist. And like I said, we work with people who do this, and they do fine. But it takes some really important attributes as a gym and coach, and like overall goals and every experience level and all that. So pros, it's obviously the fastest way to get somebody started. There's no onboarding. Let's get you into class right away. There's no additional cost. You're, having to sell an on-ramp package or anything like that. Or the scheduling, whether it's one-on-ones or a group or any of that, you're not dealing with any of that. So from an efficiency and ease standpoint, it's obviously the easiest way to go. The challenge is that it by default feels less valuable to the person who has already shopped around. So if someone is, let's say, evaluating a few gyms in the area, and they just came to me and I said, we do a 3 or 6 session onboarding program so we can teach you the fundamentals of the movements that we do in our classes, and we're also going to take this as an opportunity to teach you our approach to nutrition and recovery, because we want to make sure you get the most out of this program. And I give you this whole presentation on the value of our onboarding program, and then they go to another gym that's just like, nope, sure, hey, when do you want to get started? Some people think, oh, that's great, I can just start right away. But they're also like, well, why don't you have what that other person just sounds like they put a lot of energy into, and like everyone else had that too. So it's just be mindful, from a competition standpoint, I think, how it positions you. Because remember, you're dealing with someone who's uneducated, and it's not their responsibility to go and learn. It's your opportunity to know where they're at and to meet them where they're at. And oftentimes that means that you don't even have the opportunity to make your case.
I think this also has that can also make an impact on experienced athletes that are just joining your gym as well, because they are expecting to, they're hoping to move to another gym that's better than their last one, and so they're going 100%. To be evaluating all of your on-ramping processes, at least just observing them and seeing what's not happening, because they want to know who they're going to be working out with. And as an experienced CrossFitter, they probably don't want to be working with a bunch of people that don't know what they're doing.
For sure. The other thing too is to consider, and this is what I was getting to about the level of coach that you have, is that you're now going to be putting people into, say, a class of experienced, and you've got a full mix, right? Of first, let's say you've got people that's the first day or their first week of training, and then you've got someone who's been CrossFitting for 8 years. And this new person may be a higher needs person, or has a lot of these questions and unspoken objections, that because the coach has to kind of find the sweet spot between not completely ignoring the experienced athlete and basically not giving them any attention because this new person has a lot of questions, or is moving like they just got their body in the mail yesterday, and you got to make sure they're not getting hurt. It's an important conversation, and some coaches will argue, that's just because you just need to be a better coach. And don't get me wrong, I am all for having the best damn coaches in the world in your gym. That's kind of our thing in this business model. However, we also know that we've got newer coaches, and you can't have you can't have only aces all the time for most gyms, especially if you're in your first, few years of business. You just don't have the experience yet. So just be mindful of what dynamic that can create in your classes unexpectedly, and the damage you may be doing to your existing community. It's the same challenge people have with when they would do, deal discounts like Groupons and things like that, where all of a sudden the classes get flooded with a bunch of newbies, and the coach can't pay attention to the existing people anymore. So just understand you're doing the same thing to a degree. So anything you want to add to that?
Well, Markus, I do have a question for you. Sure. I wanted to create a scenario really quickly. So if you're doing a group onboarding, and let's say that you do have somebody in there, a new member who really needs a lot of work, can't do a box jump, needs to start with a few plates, needs a very, very scaled, different experience in the group. what would you do in that instance? Do you have a one-on-one that you would sell them, or in this case, would you just put a personal trainer on this person separately for the same cost?
So I would traditionally try to identify this as early on, ideally in the intro, if possible. I want to have a pretty good idea of where they're at and how they move, and so that when I'm putting them in this program, I would know, or at least be able to let that coach know, hey, this guy is, he's going to have a harder time, or he's got this like serious limitation, or, he's got this fear, or whatever it is. I can make sure I address it proactively. So for example, when I would be, let's say, teaching that box jump, I'm not just going to assume that everyone can do that. I mean, I think this is kind of a little bit more of an advanced coach's mentality anyway, but you're always going to address the lowest common denominator anyway, right? You're never going to make anybody feel stupid, like, oh, you can't do that. Oh, you need a plate, and seem unprepared. I'm going to say, okay, look, we're going to be, this is the finished movement. We're all going to be doing different versions of this based on what's appropriate for us. So if you're comfortable jumping on a box that's this high, awesome. We'll get you on a box that's that high. If this is your first time and maybe you're a little apprehensive, which is really common, we're going to start with a simple plate, and I'm going to see where everybody's at and make sure you're all good to go. And I would just try to address it that way. If I can't, taking that approach, resolve that and like move them forward and feel like they still got what they needed and not took away from everybody else, I may pull that person aside and say, hey, let's do a separate session so that I can fill in some gaps for you, or make sure you feel 100% about what we're doing before we get in the group classes. And more often than not, I would just do that as a courtesy, not because I'm not trying to sell. At least me personally, I wanted to make sure that the onboarding program that they bought was delivering what I said it would deliver, and not just, oh, well, hey, this product didn't fit for you, so I'm going to upsell you, as much as, hey, why don't you come in or stick around an extra 30 minutes after class on Friday, and I want to work through some additional things with you. And that way they felt like they got some extra love, and that, that's what we're here for. Because ultimately that was our vibe at Active anyway, was that we're just, if you're in the program, we're going to help you get there, and we charged accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So
great. So do you want to move into how this could actually be structured?
As
far as content goes.
Sure. Yeah. So let's get into that. So content, most people, when I have the conversation about redesigning or designing their onboarding program, think this is just about movement, and movement is really just the minimum. That is like, that's the minimum, but that's not really, in my opinion, where the value even is. Like, yes, you want to make sure they're moving well and you're assessing where they're at, and you can teach them, where the collars are and how this works and how to squat and move well. However, the point of this, and really the purpose of this show, is to show you the value in the other aspects, right? So, for example, having a topic of the day. This is key. You're spending 5 to maybe 8 minutes at the beginning or end of class to address a bigger topic. Is the big opportunity, and it also shows that there's more thought put into this. And again, this is where you're overcoming those unspoken objections and fears.
Mm-hmm.
Do you? You went through our original onboarding at Active many moons ago. For those of you who don't know, Jessica actually, before she moved up to lovely Canada, lived down here in Southern California and trained at my box, and I got her when she was brand new.
Yeah, I was in your first group class.
That's right.
I was your first graduating class.
That's right.
And it was probably the most memorable experience I have of CrossFit still to this date, was like having all those perception shifts and like paradigm shifts in my life. And it was like I discovered I was a new person. So, and even for your first try, that was your first go at it. So I think you know what you're talking about. One thing that I really loved about the onboarding process at Active was that you guys prepared us with, at the time it was written PDFs or documents that had, maybe they lived on the site, I don't remember, maybe they were emailed out, but I just remember being able to look back at all the movements that I had learned that day and to be able to dive into that proactively instead of, having to look it up on my own online, because as you guys know, there are so many different ways that, let's say we were learning the squat, I might end up on a website that's teaching like low bar squat that has nothing to do with what I just learned and confuse the hell out of myself, which when I went through the process, it was really nice to be able to get additional information to really geek out on, because that's the mode a lot of us are in when we first start CrossFit, is like, we're like, oh my God, what is this new world? Let's learn everything about it. And if your learning process isn't controlled and linear, then you can start to confuse yourself and come back to class being like, either doing it wrong or questioning the coach or just having all these things that might not be in line with how you want to structure the class.
Exactly right. Yeah, we would actually do a pre and post session email. So we would send a pre that said, hey, this just a little tease that this is what we're going to be covering, and just a little teaser to kind of like diffuse and to give you something to look forward to. And then after the session, it would be the full, like with movement videos that we broke it down. Here's what we covered and why, so that people could go back. And yeah, initially I think they didn't have the videos when we first did it in your group, but we ended up adding all these videos after the fact. And it was a very robust content support system that went along with it, which was, I mean, people still talk about it today, people who are still at the gym and whatnot, because it, you know, I wanted to make sure that they come out of the session pumped on, you know, some basic barbell movements, and then they go on YouTube and find a bunch of junk. Just like with selling supplements. You know, I sold supplements not just because it was good revenue for the business, but more importantly, I sold supplements because I picked the good ones and then gave them the good ones, rather than someone signing up and then being like, oh, I need supplements like I see everyone else with these shakers, and they go to GNC, spend $100 on a bunch of garbage, and then it's like, great, well, now you're going to be eating garbage for a month and a half, and then you can buy something, right? So it was our ability to do that. So I'm a big fan of that, and you know, you can address that different ways. You can just do a themed weekly email if it's a longer program. If you're doing, you know, individual sessions, and let's say it's just a few in a row, you can just send out an email sequence every other day and things. It doesn't have to be based on like attendance and whatnot. You don't have to get all crazy with it, but it goes a long way.
So Markus, before we get into maybe the content, I was wondering, if somebody hasn't created their on-ramping process just yet, let's say they're about to open or something, would you go the route of creating just minimum viable product, or would you go the route of like creating every single step and getting it completely prepped and ready to go? And I asked this based on maybe your own experience of having something that wasn't as thorough. Like, did you learn things during your actual on-ramping process where you tweaked it and changed it?
We tweaked and tuned. I mean, I must have tried every model under the sun over the years and to see what was the best fit. I mean, we were always chasing excellence with what this program was. Because again, this to me is the most important part of the whole thing was that initial onboarding. And yeah, we would constantly tweak it and tune it. But if you're just getting started, I say I'm always a fan of just get MVP out and start. Now that said, I'm not okay with just putting something junky out and just calling that MVP. I still am one to say, make it good. It just doesn't have to be a lot. Like, you don't have to start with, you know, these in-depth articles and write-ups and movement tip videos for every single one. And that's going to take a lot. So I think just having a little something saying, hey, great job today. Today we covered this, this, and this. Whether you put some images or link out to a technique wad or a quality video, something simple, just a little snapshot that you can send them to. They're like, oh, that was thoughtful. That's the point. Thoughtful with a little confirmation on like what we did today and little reminders. And hey, if you have questions, watch this, running video, or whatnot to give them a little extra support, a little something extra for those who want to chase it. The reality is probably only 50% of them actually will dig into it. But the point is that you sent it and they saw that you sent it, and that it's thoughtful, right? So it goes back to that dating thing, those in-between moments. Not everyone's high engagement, but it's great to even just get the touch point. So kind of digging into the idea of topic of the day. The way I like to look at this is I think of it having as like different types. So we've got a technical topic of the day. So this would be like an in-depth what is CrossFit explanation. We can have a practical, which is like nutrition, recovery. This is something that they're actually going to want to do right away. And then you have the emotional or, more intellectual stuff. And this is where I would address something like mental toughness. So using those three examples, because this is actually something I just designed with a new client just earlier this last week, was we designed a 3-session one-on-one program that because they really wanted it to be high quality and high value, but they also need to be able to get people through because of their growth goals. So we said, let's find the sweet spots. So we went with 3 one-on-ones, and those were the 3 topics we went with. So day 1, right? Someone shows up and you go through, your movement piece, your warm up, all that. And then you would spend these about 8 minutes going over, well, let me actually break down what CrossFit is. I know that we touched on this a little bit when you first came in for your intro, which is not the place to do the technical breakdown. And now you can say, hey, let me break it down for you. It's actually defined as constantly varied functional movements performed at high intensity, and here's what each one means. And you can spend a couple minutes at the whiteboard and look like a teacher or professor, which I know sounds kind of silly to say, but that's how people will start perceiving you, like, oh, there's more. It's not just a guy who knows movement. You're actually writing theory on the board. You're adding perceived value now to how they look at you, right? Not to mention you're giving them important information. This is your chance to get a little more technical. Day 2. Go ahead.
I would just say, if you guys haven't listened to the Logan episode that we did on deliberate practice, that would be a great time to kind of like go back and re-watch that show where he talks about how your team can help evaluate themselves and you and just become way better. And I think that instance, you being the professor and how you speak and how you communicate and how you are a leader in front of people would be the perfect example of how you could utilize deliberate practice in that framework, which I just thought was such a great show.
Yeah, beautiful. Logan's the man. Okay, so day 2, nutrition and recovery. And the reason why I like to put this on day 2 is because this is the thing that most people have the most questions about when they're new. What should I be eating? And what's the trick? Because that's, again, something that we mentioned when they're initially signing up, because it's something sexy in that everybody has questions about it. And this is your opportunity to break down your approach to it. And again, this is the practical. So this isn't about going into the weeds, but I would usually explain it as like, hey, we actually made it very simple. Most people come up with these overcomplicated approaches. For most, it's as simple as just eating meat, vegetables, nuts and seeds, drinking water, skip the booze, avoid the grains. And then we get into recovery, sleep in a dark room. You need more hours than you think you do. And, try not to watch TV. Like, you just give them some low hanging fruit. And then and it's a beautiful place, if you're only doing 3 sessions, also to plant supplements, right? So I would do a quick Q&A, and I would kind of make the mock one up front and say like, hey, well, what about supplements? Great question, Markus. And answer my own question, because everyone had the question. Oh, they're like, oh, yeah, that's right. What about supplements? And I'd say, well, most of the stuff you see out there, it's a crazy marketing industry where they sell mostly junk, but there's some really good things out there. We have some samples. Check it out. You like chocolate or vanilla? Here, have both, and get them to experience it. And then guess what? Now they're able to get this stuff through you. You just planted it, and you're going to up your retail sales. But more importantly, you got them before they ran out and bought it on their own and showed up with a bunch of, C4 junk. So
I love that nutrition is day 2, because if we remember back to that 6th stage of where people are evaluating you, during this evaluation process, they're also paying attention to results that are gained during this time. And to think that on day 2 that they would be seeing any results, well, they can if they understand ways to sleep better, ways to eat better, what happens when you cut out bread. I mean, that you can experience immediate changes in the way that you feel and like emotionally feel and stuff like that. And also giving them permission or just reminding them to make note of how they feel now versus a couple days from now where they implement all of these things. And then again, they will be checking that box of, yeah, I'm seeing results immediately, even if it's not in like the physical kind of way that they would normally see a fitness sort of evaluation go.
100%. And if you remember too, this is also an opportunity for you to overcome potential like issues in the future. I'll give you an example. So oftentimes when you have new people who start, you'll have people who begin with the program and they're super into like the workouts and showing up, and they do that, but they won't change their diet. I mean, I've literally had new people tell me like, this is so fun. I'm willing to do anything you tell me to do in here, but I'm not changing my diet. I work out so that I can eat how I want, which is bananas. But the point is that this is also my opportunity to address that proactively. So where I say, hey, look, the reason why we bring this up is because this is so much so much more of the equation than most people think it is. Most people think I need to work out and kind of fix my diet. And yes, that is much better than not doing either. However, that if you're here for body composition and you're trying to alter the way that you look aesthetically, and that's your priority, which at the end of the day, I mean, who doesn't want to look awesome and who doesn't like abs and all that stuff, then this is actually where you need to put the majority of the energy. Because really, you just have to get your butt in here 3-4 days a week when you're getting started, and you will already make progress performance-wise. However, if you want the visual result to go along with that as quickly, you need to be as serious about the nutrition, and it's actually not that hard. Right? So if you're listening to me going, yep, I'm still going to have my 3 glasses of wine every night, that's fine. Like, do you? But in 6 months from now, when you're like, I can't seem to lose this weight around my midsection, and I ask you if you're still having 3 glasses of wine a night, don't be surprised with the conversation that's going to follow. Right? Mm-hmm. And I would kind of, in a friendly way, I would kind of overcome that conversation right now. And that would allow me to, when we get there and they're like, yeah, I know you told me. And it's like, okay, so that's not an excuse. So what's going on? You know what I mean? So these are the kinds of things I want to plant up front so that in the future, because I know that's a common thing, I'm going to diffuse that right now, or at very least give myself the opportunity to diffuse that when it comes time down the road. So anyway, last topic for day 3 was mental toughness. And this is that emotional one. And I think this is one of the most important ones. This is the one where, I mean, I've had people tear up when we do this talk. And this is always on the last day for me. And the reason why is that, why I think this is so important is this is your opportunity to paint a much broader picture of how this will benefit them. And this is also your opportunity for most gym owners. This is actually your why for people, what I'm going to, how I present this. And it's your opportunity to be passionate about what you do for people. So the mental toughness is not just about like coming in and grinding it out. It's about, the beauty in our program and you coming in here every day and looking at a workout and going, holy crap, that looks really hard. I'm not sure I can do that. But next thing you know, you started the workout, and next thing you know, you're having fun, and next thing you know, you finished it and you feel awesome for having done it, and you feel great physically for having done it. You're not just going to get physically stronger and lose weight and all that good stuff. You're also going to become mentally and emotionally stronger. And personally, for me as a coach, that is my favorite part of what we do, because what we do here is not just about making fitter, stronger people. I want to create better, happier people who live a longer, healthier, more fulfilling life. And when you come in here and you do that day in and day out, and you conquer things that you didn't know you can do, you're going to become more confident. You're going to become tougher. And when you have challenges at work or challenges in life, you're going to look at them as like another thing that I'm going to conquer, because I'm used to winning at things that suck. And for me, I get to watch people blossom into not just better athletes and better looking versions of themselves, but more confident, happier people who are better leaders, better teachers. And when you say that to a group of newer people, they go, oh shit, I didn't even think of that. And you just painted a picture that's so much bigger than just we do, well-designed workouts and keep you safe and have fun. It's a much bigger thing that we do. And that's what I was getting at about like having people understand how huge the value of what we do really is. And you want to kind of end on that note, and people will walk away going, I made a damn good decision. Like, this is way more than I even thought. And look at how passionate this person is. I mean, I seriously, and this is a little embarrassing, like I almost tear up every time that I give that speech. And I have no joke, I have probably given that speech 500 times. And because it is my actual why, right? And that never gets old to say. And when you show that to someone, and you can be vulnerable and honest about this and show them, hey, this is about that bigger thing, you'll get under people's skin. And people, I mean, years later would come to me and say, like, it was that talk that did it for me. And that's awesome to hear. And it's, again, if you weren't doing these on-ramps, or you weren't doing a topic of the day and just teaching a squat or a push-up or a barbell clean or whatever, it's like, that's great, but you're missing a huge opportunity.
Yeah. What you're doing here is you're cultivating and you're crafting your culture also. So you can also think about this in terms of hiring a bunch of new employees. You're the CEO of this big company, and then every time you hire on a new employee, you really need to have these culture talks and maybe do some priming, which sounds a little like sneaky, but like making sure that people, when they do release themselves into the real world of your company or in your gym, that they're not creating debt for your company. This is something that I like talking about. It's like, if you hire somebody on, or you bring in somebody into your gym, and they are maybe a fantastic athlete, but they just have a terrible attitude, it's not just bad for this person, maybe annoying to the coach, creating debt within the gym. So if you have a culture of just allowing complaining to happen, look, every CrossFit WOD is hard, okay? But do you have a culture of people who complain about it and just start, skipping out on rowing days and running days? That can happen quickly, and then you can become this really negative kind of culture, and it's really difficult to try to make something different out of something that has just been blooming like cancer in your gym for so long. It's really difficult to cut it off and start something new. So having these people who are brand new, they're primed to think kind of like exactly how you want them to think. You're changing the way they move, the way they eat, the way they sleep and breathe. Now you have to change the way they think and the way they communicate about things, so they don't bring in that negativity and sort of infect the rest of your gym.
Yep, 100%. 100%. Love that. So, it looks like your internet connection's a little funky, Jess. You're frozen with a funny face on my end here.
Oh, shite.
No, all good. There we go. Okay. So let's, and some other topics. I know I just gave you the 3 examples here, but if you're doing, let's say, a 6-session onboarding program, or you have more sessions overall. So I wanted to give you guys a couple other examples for topics like intensity versus duration, doing self-myofascial release, where you spend some time teaching them about, foam rolling lacrosse balls, give them some fundamentals. Gym culture is a really good one, and attitude and spirit of the gym. Supplementation, you can break off from that nutrition or recovery talk, or you can break the recovery one off, a separate one as well. And these are some ideas for you to add more to it, but think of it as the opportunities of not just the things that you want to teach them that they need to know technically, but again, what's most important to them and what's going to overcome those unspoken fears and objections. And the last one, so if you have a longer one, we did one that was 6 sessions, 2 weeks, 3 days a week for 2 weeks. That was the one we did the longest. That was probably our most successful program. That 6th session was actually about what to expect next. And this actually speaks to one of the questions I see here in the queue from Jack Green. What's up, Jack? I'll just address this one now. So it says, Markus, can you talk about the best way to transition from group foundations to regular classes? Sometimes we see people go through foundations and then immediately start to fall off before taking regular classes. That is exactly what this topic would address, is it would be all about saying, hey, you finished our onboarding program, you have rocked it in this thing, and now you're going to get ready to get into our group classes. And I start overcoming the fears and the objections. Sometimes we'll see people who, did phenomenally well in the onboarding program, but they have some hesitations about coming in, or they say, I'll start next week. I'm going to give you guys one of the biggest tips I give our new athletes. We're going to schedule your first day, or schedule your first next session today. And if you ever have questions and you're in our class, I want you to know our coaches eat, sleep, and breathe human movement. And for you to say, hey, I don't remember what that movement is, or I don't know what to do, or I feel lost, just know they know that you're new and they've got their eye on you, and they will never let you flounder, and that there's no such thing as a silly question. I don't care if you ask me, what's a clean again? Or what's the difference between a snatch and a power snatch or a muscle snatch? Just ask, because I want to make sure that you actually feel comfortable doing this. It's the key to your success. So never hesitate. Can we all agree that we're going to do that? You're never going to hesitate to ask. Yes, they all agree. Okay, and if you ever have, I know some of you, like myself, I've got this old shoulder thing that acts up every now and again. If you have something that's ever bugging you, or you're like, hey, that knee thing is starting to get a little achy again, do not hesitate to come to a coach and let them know, hey, my knee's kind of bugging me, and we've got a bunch of running today. Can you modify this for me? Again, that's what they're here to do. We're not here to just read a workout to you and say, figure it out. That's exactly why they're here, is to make sure we can adjust it for each and every one of you. So never hesitate to mention if something is physically bothering you or you're uncomfortable. Deal? Deal. So I would basically address these issues and try to get them to schedule their first class with me at the end, if possible, to get them to transition in so that they felt more comfortable. And when I implemented that talk on day 6, it dramatically changed how many people would drop off between that that onboarding and that first class and that like kind of first month and transitioning in. And I would also, by the way, follow up with everyone after they finished that last session and send them a personal text message saying, hey, great job, man. I'm super pumped to get you in your group classes. When's your first session?
Yeah, just to underline that, if you guys go back and listen to the Brittany Welk show that we did, she talks about her ambassador program. Amazing strategy for getting people integrated into like regular classes.
100%. Yeah, totally spaced on that. Brittany and Marcia have a stellar program. It's very simple, and it's just about having basically a buddy, an accountability person that's a member that's helping scooch them along and move them forward and make them feel comfortable, like they've got someone on the inside that's going to help them get in. So make sure you check out that episode. All right. So let's move into pricing, because this is where I think a lot of people will get stuck, is how do I price it? And I'll kind of lump in the length of like how long should I make this, because they kind of go hand in hand. So when you're looking at pricing, I say start with perceived value. What kind of image are you trying to portray? And that said, I want to add a caveat here, is that just because you in your heart may think like, everyone should be going through, 25 one-on-one sessions with me before they go in, because that's ideal. And I know that's best case scenario. Remember, you're also in business. And if that's not suitable for what you're trying to do, know that you may be outpricing or providing too big of a hurdle for your ideal client. Because most people tell me their ideal client is, let's say, moms and dads and like average Joes, or you have athletes, or whatever your target is. Understand that you have to price it in something that is affordable for them. And I don't mean cheap, I just mean realistic. Right? So you're targeting people who are like, hey man, I'm like spending $200 a month on a gym membership is already a big leap for me. And you're expecting them to start with a $1,200 package. You may be creating unnecessary friction for yourself, when you could say like, I want it to be one-on-one and high quality, and I want it to feel like it's really valuable, because that's what we're here, where it's an individualized, attention centric program. Then do it one-on-one, but make it smaller so that you can price it around what is going to be appropriate for you. So the perceived value and your ability to sell and kind of what's packaged into it is really how you're going to do this. And I'd like to say a fair place to start is you're getting into difficult territory whenever it's more than 1.5 times whatever your monthly membership is. You're going to have a harder time selling that program, and unless you're a very good salesperson, which hopefully it's something you're striving to do. And I don't mean tricky. I just mean you're very good at people understanding the value of your program. That comes with time. But be mindful with that. That's kind of a rule of thumb for me. If someone's newer to selling, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Jess?
Well, yes. Okay, so the majority of the sale happens before anybody even speaks to you. So if your website isn't to the T and your email communication isn't like perfectly crafted in the most personalized way, having something very expensive is suggest to someone. I mean, like unrealistically expensive. It's difficult for me to suggest just because they haven't been prepped for that. I would also say that's true for gyms that are brand new, unless you've had a ton of experience on your belt, because you don't have a lot of brand equity and a lot of social proof. That can also be pretty difficult. But if you have a ton of social proof, if you have a lot of experience under your belt, if you have a really flowy sales and marketing process like those 6 stages we were just talking about, the price could be whatever you really want it to be.
Sure.
I mean, there's always somebody that can afford something if they want it bad enough. So it's kind of like a case by case thing.
Yeah. And again, where you are, so if you're trying to grow rapidly, like you're brand new, probably don't go with a really big expensive package. It can be what you're striving for and what you ultimately want to sell most. It's better for those who are maybe more mature and have all those assets, but also aren't trying to grow at a rapid clip and maybe are just trying to kind of trickle grow now over time and really layer it on, which is, once maybe let's say you get to that like 100 member threshold where bills are paid, we're able to do business well, right? For most. And again, it's going to differ if you're in, Manhattan, New York, or Southern California, it's a higher number. But point is that you're able to do well, and you can say, okay, now let's just go for quality, right? And not having to kind of balance that threshold. But again, depends on the person. So
That's a great point. You have to spend a lot more time making a really personalized experience. You can charge more with any service when we're selling soap or whatever, if you can really identify who you're selling it to. So if you're selling gym memberships to just lawyers or just construction workers, they're willing to pay more because they know that this program is for them, because you understand their persona super well. But if you, like you were saying, you need to grow quickly, you're reaching out to just general population, your price really does kind of need to reflect having a more general approach.
Yep. Yeah, in my experience, and I'll give just kind of some blanket examples here because those are inevitably the questions I get, like, well, what would you suggest to most? For most doing personal training, somewhere between 3 and 5 sessions is proving to be ideal. Not ideal from a training standpoint. Again, as just the coach in me, I'd love to have 10, 15, 20 sessions with someone because I can get them so teed up and have a really great relationship. But that's also not really the business I was in, and the business that most of the gym owners we talk to are actually in. So 3 to 5 sessions is a sweet spot. And the other thing to remember, and this is the part that most people forget about, is that people's attention span. That's a long chunk of one-on-one training time and scheduling that is a foreign thing to them. And they want to get to the product like in a reasonable amount of time, right? And so you're kind of creating unnecessary tension with them by making this too long. Because it's like, well, you're going to have to do 3 days a week for the next, 6 weeks, one-on-one with me scheduling. It's cumbersome. And you're going to have some that can just do it no problem, but just understand that a lot of people want to get to the good stuff. They want to get to the workouts. They want to get to the group thing that they saw the pictures of, the videos of, and so on. And what they've heard about. So just be mindful of that. And for the group stuff, typically it's also 3 to 6 sessions. And I like to look at it as 1 week or 2 weeks is usually the sweet spot. So 3 sessions over the course of 1 week, or 6 sessions or 5 sessions over the course of 2 weeks. Just be mindful about spacing out. Don't do I'm going to do 6 sessions, but do 2 a week over 3 weeks. You're creating too much space between it. Again, you want to kind of rapid fire move people through this as quickly as you can, because you want to keep the excitement high. So be mindful if you're doing it group or even the one-on-one stuff, don't spread it out. Try to condense it as much as you can. And every other day protocol is pretty good. And if you're saying, well, they're going to be too sore, they need more time to recover, then you need to reevaluate what you're doing with them from a movement standpoint and make it more appropriate, because we're not trying to thrash people and show them how hard this is necessarily either. That's going to happen by default.
To kind of elaborate on one of the past points you just said there, they are definitely looking forward to getting to the good stuff, but you also want to make it seem, it is true, that the on-ramping process, that's some good stuff too. So you always want to brand it as well. Give it a name, make it sound awesome, so that it doesn't just seem like this class that a bunch of people who are terrible at working out do before they get into the cool stuff. And it also helps raise the value of your class when it has a name and it's branded and it has its own thing.
For sure. One of the best things I think we did at Active was, for one, we called it our Active On-Ramp program. Now, I know that's not very sexy now, but the reason why it became a thing was because we made some really nice custom certificates that were Active branded. And it was, you have successfully completed the Active On-Ramp program. It was signed by myself and my partner, Scott. And it had their name printed on it. It was on nice cardstock, like a real certification, better than what most people get when they pay a lot for a certification. And at the end of day 6 or the last day of the program, we would have them ready for everyone, hand them to them. They walk up, we shake their hand, I give them the certificate. And at the end, everyone held up their certificate. We did a big group shot. We would tag everybody. It was a thing. And it now was, people would see, when they were joining up with us, new to CrossFit people would see, oh, there's all these groups of pictures. Think of CrossFit.com, right? And you look at all the L1 graduates and how they collage or used to collage all the pics together. And you're like, man, look at all those people going through that. I'm going to be one of those people. And it turns it into a thing. So you have an opportunity here, guys, with your gym to, even if it's just a few sessions, to make them feel like they've successfully accomplished something that's a thing that you clearly care about and you know what you're talking about. So now they're going to care about it a little bit more and take some pride in this thing. Usually they'll then take it and if you make a big deal about it, hey, this is awesome. You completed this thing. You've shown, understanding in these core movements and this and that. They'll take it and they'll pin it up in their office or put it on the refrigerator and it becomes a little thing for them. And you don't realize 6 months down the road, it's like a point of pride in their office. It's pretty cool. It's a very big opportunity for you to create a thing for them.
The quality of that certificate was so nice. I remember it's actually nicer than my partner just retired from the military and he got a certificate that was like way less quality than the certificate I got for doing 5 days in on-ramp. Yes. But I remember somebody in the on-ramping class at some point, they didn't get their certificate. Like they had missed a class and so they came to the last one and they didn't get their certificate. I remember how upset they were. And that just makes me think of all of the little areas where you can just put in, it's a piece of paper, like how much does it really cost, to have such a big impact on someone? Mm-hmm. One really fun exercise to do if you're ever just not in the throes of running a business, you can sit back and map out the intersections of every interaction a customer or a member has with you and figure out really low cost ways to make that experience just that much better, and you'd be surprised at what would create such a big impact like a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes a really, really long way. People use T-shirts and things too, and it's a thing, right? You put something in somebody's hand that's, again, something that they weren't expecting. It just bumps that perceived value and creates more of that wow effect, which is ultimately what we're shooting for at all of those steps. Okay, cool. So now let's open this up for Q&A. I've got a few here in the comments already waiting. I know we addressed Jack's already. And if you've got more, fire away now. This is your opportunity. And if you're watching this again after the fact, and because we're probably only going to have time to get through a few questions today, so we're already a little over an hour here now. But just put them to comments, tag Jessica and or myself in them, and we'll of course answer them for you at any time. So, all right, let's get into the first one I've got here. From James Moran, we are just starting out and our class attendance is very small, 2 to 5 people. And let me see if I can fly this thing in. Oh, I got it. 2 to 5 people, sometimes just one person. We've been just having people come straight into class, and as we're limited with staff, me and my partner, and both of us have kept our primary jobs for now, we still want to have some one-on-one time. Do you have any recommendations on how to still get that one-on-one time, phone calls, off gym time meetings, etc.? So let me take a quick look here and make sure I understand this correctly. And get the sizing right because it's got a lot going on my screen here. So 2 to 5 people, just sometimes one person. We've been having people come straight into class. This kind of thing, if you're trying to have more one-on-one interaction with people, James, I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure I'm understanding the question exactly here, but if you don't have the capacity to do it in person, like to where you can do sessions and things like that, because starting to schedule like coffee time or like extra sessions, if you're already strapped, which it sounds like you are because you still have a full-time gig, and you're maybe coaching mornings and evenings, you may be a little bit limited. That's where doing a phone call check-in, text message check-in, email check-ins throughout your program can go a really long way. A lot of the gym owners that we work with are very limited on time, especially those that are new, because you're usually juggling all these roles by yourself, and you don't have the luxury of this additional face time to spend with people. And if that is the case, follow up, like have, after day 1, for example, give them a follow-up call right away and say, or the following day between sessions 1 and 2 and say, hey, just want to check in and see how you're feeling. You did awesome in class. How are you? And do a little personal touch, and hey, make sure you drink lots of water, and go for a 5-minute walk today. That little personal check-in and advice means a lot. And then at maybe halfway through, you send them an email saying, hey, I just wanted to see how you're feeling about the program this far. Let me know if there's anything I can do to make your experience better, and shoot the email out. And then at the end, it's text message follow-up, like I said, after the last day. Hey, you did so awesome in this program. Things like that are a very scalable way to do it, because you don't have to schedule time between the both of you, which is going to be difficult. That's how I approach it, and I hope I'm answering your question well enough, James. Feel free to fire away on if I didn't address that, or if I did. Jessica, any thoughts on that?
Sounds good to me. You always want to do things that seem out of the ordinary from a gym perspective. They would never expect a phone call or text message from the gym owner of 24-Hour Fitness. So just remember that those little things, piece of paper, like low-hanging fruit kinds of things, can make a huge impact if they're done at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep, agreed. Okay. Next one here. Abby says, I call those the Oprah moments. So that was before the emotional talk piece. All right. Another question from James. Let's put this one up here. Another good one. What are your thoughts on having a rolling on ramp? So i.e. run Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 2 weeks, but someone can jump in at any time and just need to complete all 6 sessions before graduating. Upside I see is someone coming in on a Tuesday on the first week doesn't have to wait a week and a half to start. Downside I see is that people coming in randomly might diminish the small community feel of a set on ramp where everyone started at the same point. You nailed it already. This can also be a really good solution for someone who is limited on time and staff and wants to have an onboarding program. And no, it's not ideal. I mean, pros and cons are exactly what you said. People not starting and finishing together means it's gonna feel a lot more disconnected. The community element is gonna be much harder, in which case I would probably build into every one of those sessions, either in the warm-up, the cool down, or the actual workout itself, make them team activities so that people are forced to engage with each other. And I would make that like really a focal point of my program, so that even if someone's jumping in halfway and everyone else seems like they're buddies already and I feel like an outsider, we got to avoid that. That is critical that they get integrated immediately. And you may want to instruct your staff, or if you're doing these yourself, make sure that if hey, this guy is jumping into a batch of 4 people that have been doing this already, that you partner them up with the most social person, or you use them in examples and things so that they feel like a part of it right away and never like an outsider from whatever cliques or sub cliques may be forming in that little community. But it's a good way to do it if you're just trying to kind of provide something and you don't have flexibility. Ideally, I would prefer to do it where it's a little bit more set, but I've used this model with many gyms very successfully. All right, let's see. Eric Klaus, what's up, Eric? Are you just emailing them about the topics discussed, or actually bringing it up in class, or both? Both. So what I do is I would actually have the topic of the day, or actually would have the whole day. So let's say on-ramp day 2, I would have written on the board when they got there, from the warm-up to the workout to the topic of the day, with my points already up and prepared. And this was in line with the content that I would email them. So it's all one consistent story. So I would prefer doing both. You can, what I would not do is just email them and then not do it in class. That's the least valuable way to do this, because unless you're making it a thing in class and engaging with them and saying, hey, I'm going to send you an email after class that's got some great links for you to check out, most people aren't going to care about it. But if you give value and give life to that email and say, hey, make sure you check it out. It's a really funny video of Coach so-and-so breaking this down. It's one of my favorites. Like, sell it. So people go into it and they start trusting your content. Super important. Jessica, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. Also make sure that you have some kind of automation system to do this. Like, I can guarantee you're not going to want to send out emails, even if you're like copying and pasting and sending them out manually. That's just not doable and can become one of the worst parts of your job. So, if you're not already on the platform, which already does this, you can go into ActiveCampaign, you can go into Aweber, just any of these marketing automation softwares, and set up some nurturing sequences for yourself, so that when somebody starts an on-ramping program, you can just put them in that bucket and it'll stream them this content. And even if it doesn't go out on the same day, that's okay. Like, what we need to do here is just make sure that people are kind of revisiting these things, and like we were talking about before, having these little, like in the relationship example, having these little text messages in between actually having these one-on-one dates, so that you keep people engaged and they don't go wandering off.
Yep, exactly right. That's actually how the platform was born, was when because I was doing that all manually, and then started playing with these different automation tools, and then just became more and more detailed as we went, and here we are many moons later. So, okay.
Yeah, and even more simplified, you can go with pieces of paper, like printed out a little handbook that you give to people.
Yep. Yeah, we were actually just at a box yesterday, and he had everything was on clipboards, everything was nice and organized, and he's like, I like it manual, and sure, I'll send them emails and stuff too, but I like this like tangible piece of paper. Whatever works for you, do your thing. Hand it to him every time. Here's what we're going to go over. Take this home. Here's a cheat sheet. Whatever floats your boat. Cool. All right. I think we're going to wrap it for today, as I think we're running out of time here. I know we've got to get on with our Fridays, and I'm sure you want to do the same. That said, if you have any questions about what we talked about today that come up after the fact, post them to comments, tag Jessica and myself. We're happy to address them for you. And if this is your first time catching us, be sure to check out Gymwright.com. We've got some great tools. All our previous shows are on there as well. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and all that. Anything you want to add, Jess?
Yeah, definitely follow us on Instagram. We have Hank and Markus, who you guys, I don't know, haven't met yet probably. He's not on the show very often.
There's two of us.
But they are so great, and they're going to be putting all like little snippets of shows on there, tips from other gym owners. It's going to become a really great resource for people. While you're sitting on the toilet going through your Instagram account, like, why not learn?
Because that's where we all
definitely do that.
Look at our Instagram. Fact. Yeah, check it out. We've got a ton of new content coming out, guys. This show is really just the start for what we're doing with Gymwright. And Markus and Hank are putting some incredible stuff together. We're out on the road. Every week interviewing gym owners, and we are out there gathering information for you guys to share with you. So thank you very much for joining us this week. We hope to see you again next week for another awesome show. Jessica, thanks for being on with me here today. And
thanks for having me.
Yes, of course, always. And have yourselves a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.